Hey guys, my name is Jack, and today we're going to talk about the effects of baseball in developing nations. Throughout the years, sports have been used to bring people together through competition and culture. Sports have been dated to over 3,000 years ago, dating back to almost 2500 BCE. I'm going to be focusing on the sport of baseball. Baseball has created a culture for people across the world to become successful at a game that they love and cherish. But as baseball has developed over time, it has had effects on countries worldwide. In this video, we will take a deeper look into the Dominican Republic with the history of baseball and their culture, the expansion of players from the Dominican Republic to the MLB in the United States, and the future of baseball for Dominican-born players in the United States and in the Dominican Republic. Then we will look at these effects in specific countries and how some of these effects have had positive impacts like global integration, scholarships, and economic growth, and then negative impacts such as the distraction on educational values, commercialization and exploitation, and overall mental health issues for the citizens of developing nations and the country itself. There are many countries to choose from when it comes to these effects that baseball has had. Countries from Asia like Japan and North and South Korea, all the way to Cuba, have been affected by the sport of baseball in their own way. Today, we'll be focusing on the Dominican Republic. Baseball was introduced to the people of the Dominican Republic in the 1870s, but became popular in the Dominican Republic in the early 1900s. Since a lot of people who played baseball in the Dominican Republic worked on sugar plantations, they were able to find open areas around these fields that they worked in. Over time, the workers would be placed onto company teams. Most of these company teams were sponsored by sugar enterprises, but some were rum and fruit enterprises as well. Soon after this, the First World War impacted the Dominican Republic, causing the deployment of U.S. Marines being sent to the Dominican Republic to protect the President of the Dominican Republic, Juan Jimenez. These Marines were already familiar with the game of baseball, and in their free time, just like the plantation workers, they would spend their time playing baseball against the plantation workers. Even long after the war was over, the Marines stayed until 1924 because of how much they enjoyed playing against the people of the Dominican Republic and the passion that they played with. With that being said, the Dominican Professional Baseball League, otherwise known as the DPBL, was created at the same time. This league was filled with raw and natural talent, but these athletes never got the scouting that they needed to be able to make it to the MLB. All this changed in 1956 when Ozzie Virgil became the first Dominican-born player to make it to the MLB. Love started at an early age growing up in the Dominican Republic, moved all the way to the United States as a teenager. Even though he moved to the United States, his dream of playing baseball was still the same. Ozzie Virgil broke the barrier for other Latino-born players who had dreams of making it to the MLB. Shortly after Ozzie made it to the MLB, many other Latino-born players were getting contracts from professional teams with the help of scouts that visited the Dominican Republic. And for the Dominican men, baseball wasn't the only motivation for them to make it to the United States, but also to escape poverty and violence that fills the Dominican Republic. As time moved forward, the population of players from the Dominican Republic and any other Latino-born players kept rising. In today's game, almost 30% of the current MLB players are from the Dominican Republic or another Latino country. Compared to the 50s and 60s, this is a substantial growth, and scouts have even directed most of their main looks toward people in the Dominican Republic and other countries. With a new rule that was highly advocated for in the MLB, every team is now required to go scouting outside the United States to look for talent in other countries. This is because baseball isn't just a sport that only Americans play anymore. Right now, baseball is the most diverse it has ever been. A lot of these players from the Dominican Republic have become idols to the younger generation of baseball players for their character and style of play. Some of these players include Juan Soto and Julio Rodriguez, who are two examples of Dominican-born players that have made a massive impact on the younger generation of baseball players, as they try to shape their game into playing like these new faces of the MLB. The Dominican Republic has been one of the many developing nations that have gone through changes from the effects of baseball. And with that, other countries have gone through similar effects. Promoting culture in developing nations has various benefits that provide positive activity for the sport and communities involved. One of these various benefits is global integration and exposure. In Japan, the NPB is a major league that is very similar to the MLB with the idea of two separate leagues. These leagues include the Central and the Pacific League. In this league, we've seen players that have moved from the NPB to the MLB, players including Ichiro Suzuki and Shohei Ohtani. Like the Dominican Republic, this has caused more and more players to move from Japan to the United States to play in the MLB. This helps both Japan and the United States because there's a wider range of viewers that are now watching the MLB and the NPB. Ultimately, baseball has caused separate nations to find common ground to bring people on two completely different sides of the planet to boost viewership and the spread of baseball itself. With the rich history that baseball has, promoting baseball in other nations would help integrate these nations into the global sports community. Not only will it help the community, but it will also help the talented athletes from these nations who aren't getting the same scouting as athletes in the United States. This exposure to the athletes that are under the radar can secure scholarships with schools or even contracts with professional teams. This opens doors to education and career opportunities that wouldn't have been available. Another benefit to the developing nations would be educational purposes for the children that grow up in developing nations. Since schools are central in promoting sports, encouraging baseball culture can enhance school engagement and attendance. With that, young student athletes will be motivated to play baseball and maintain good grades to keep pursuing baseball. This will also teach them skills like cooperation, discipline, and strategy. By promoting this, these skills can be instilled into young athletes that will prove to be important in their later stages of life. This can be done by building sports facilities for players all the way to selling pieces of equipment and merchandise for fans. Doing this creates jobs for the citizens of the developing nations when it can be hard for them to succeed as a worker. While baseball has had positive effects on countries, there also have been some negative effects that have been targeted towards these countries. Some of these negative effects include a distraction from education for players in these countries, commercialization and exploitation of players, and overall mental health issues for athletes. When it comes to athletes and general players in the United States, the term student athlete is introduced to them. All young student athletes are taught from when they first start playing sports that school is always first before they pursue other activities because of the values that American families have. In other countries, this isn't the case. In the Dominican Republic, baseball players on average spend 12 hours a week in school, compared to the United States, where all students and players spend on average 30 hours a week. With only a small percentage of these players having a future in baseball, their education levels are so much lower compared to the average player in the United States. So most of these foreign players in developing countries aren't getting the right education to be successful in life if baseball doesn't work out. While pursuing a career in sports is a valid aspiration, a well-rounded education is ultimately more important than anything for the future of a young human being. In recent history, it has been an ongoing issue for all athletes around the world who are being exploited for their contributions to their respective organizations. But in baseball, most players in other countries are constantly being exploited for their skills in the lower professional levels of the MLB. In 2014, a Latino-born player, Wieder Jimenez, spoke about his salary while playing for the Philadelphia Phillies in the minor leagues. He filed a lawsuit against the MLB regarding the minimum salary of players in the minor leagues. To understand the inequality of the minor leagues, we must look at the amount of people playing in the minor leagues. According to NBC News, there are about 7,000 players on the payroll of Major League Baseball teams, most of them in the minor leagues. The minimum in-season monthly salary for a major leaguer is $84,000, compared to the minimum in the season salary of a minor leaguer is only $1,000. Potentially, baseball players could be making as low as $13,200 a year, which is almost $20,000 less than the average salary in the United States. Most of these players sign into these contracts while they're teenagers, so they don't see that they're signing unfavorable contracts or that they're subjected to exploitation by corrupt agents. This shows that athletes who come from developing nations are easily taken advantage of by the higher organizations with a lot of power. Everyone knows that there are physical risks when playing a sport, but there are also psychological risks that are just as important to the physical risks when playing. According to a study by the Journal of Orthopedic and Sports Physical Therapy, they did a study that could tie baseball to mental health issues and found that the negative impacts of sports participation on psychological health can be due to sustaining injury, competition stress, team selection, and performance pressures. All this shows that there are risks for baseball players all over the world, and it could be worse for the players in developing nations because of the financial burden of trying to provide for their own family. As you can see, there are many ways that the game of baseball has affected developing nations and their citizens. But with the help from different types of organizations, including the MLB, baseball will continue to thrive in developing nations and continue to affect developing nations like the Dominican Republic. As viewers and fans of the game, we get to watch this beautiful sport bring out the best in young athletes all over the world and enjoy the game itself. Again, my name is Jack Vivarka, and thank you for tuning in.